I never thought I'd be the type of woman to hide things from my husband. For 10 years we've shared everything, our dreams, fears, and even our deepest desires. We've always been open-minded, the kind of couple that friends envy for our adventurous spirit and unbreakable bond. But as I sit here, heart pounding and palms clammy, I realize I'm about to share a secret I never intended to tell. It all started innocently enough. Mark and I were always looking for ways to keep our marriage exciting: date nights, vacations, role-playing. It was all part of our commitment to each other. Then one night over a glass of wine, Mark suggested something new. What if we tried couple swapping? He asked casually, as though he were suggesting a new Netflix show. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. You are serious? Why not? He said, his blue eyes twinkling with mischief. It's just a game. We set rules and it's all about trust, no strings attached. The idea was bold even for us, but the way Mark explained it made sense. It wasn't about love or replacing each other, it was about exploring together with complete honesty. After a few more discussions I agreed. The rule was simple: we could only do it if we both consented, and it would always be a one-time thing with no repeat encounters. Our first few experiences were admittedly thrilling. They brought a new spark to our relationship, and I loved how we'd laugh and talk about it afterwards, reaffirming our connection. Then came the night that changed everything. Mark had met a couple through a mutual friend. Sarah was bubbly and outgoing, while her husband James was quiet but confident, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a presence that made you notice him. From the moment we met I felt an odd tension whenever James was near me. His deep voice, the way he looked at me, it was like he could see right through me. That night the four of us met at their home. The wine flowed freely, and soon Mark and Sarah disappeared into another room, leaving James and me alone. The silence was heavy, and for the first time in years I felt nervous. You don't have to do this if you're uncomfortable, James said, his voice low and reassuring. I'm fine, I replied, though my voice trembled. James was gentle yet firm, and as the night unfolded I discovered something I hadn't expected. Ed, he was different. His size, his touch, the way he made me feel, it was overwhelming in a way that left me breathless. For the first time I experienced something I couldn't easily describe. It wasn't just physical, it was as though he unlocked a part of me I didn't know existed. The next morning I couldn't stop thinking about him. His presence lingered like a shadow, intruding on my thoughts. Even as I tried to focus on Mark I convinced myself it was just a fleeting reaction to something new and exciting. But as days turned into weeks I realized I was lying to myself. James had left a mark on me, one I couldn't ignore. Mark, oblivious to my inner turmoil, continued as though nothing had changed to him. The experience was just another chapter in our adventurous story, but for me it was the beginning of a secret I would carry alone. Looking back, I wish I had stopped then. I wish I had told Mark how I felt and worked through it together, but I didn't. Instead I let curiosity take root, and soon that curiosity would grow into something far more dangerous. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring you more captivating real-life confessions. Turn on notifications so you don't miss a single episode. Now let's dive deeper into the secret life I never imagined I'd live. Days passed, but my mind kept drifting back to James. At first I told myself it was harmless, a passing thought, a memory of something different and exciting, but the more I tried to push it away, the more persistent it became. I'd be folding laundry or cooking dinner, and suddenly his face would appear in my mind. I'd hear his voice, feel the weight of his hands, and my heart would race as if I were back in that room with him. Mark noticed the change in me but assumed it was a good thing. You've been glowing lately, he said one morning as we shared coffee on the patio. It's like you're happier. I forced a smile, just feeling good I guess, but deep down I wasn't sure how to handle the storm brewing inside me. I loved Mark, I still do. He's my best friend, my partner, the man who's been there for me through everything. But something about James had awakened a part of me I couldn't explain. It wasn't just physical, it was as though he had tapped into a hidden corner of my soul, one I didn't even know existed. One evening while scrolling through my phone I saw a message from an unfamiliar number. Hi, it's James, hope you don't mind me reaching out. My heart skipped a beat. I stared at the screen, torn between excitement and guilt. I knew I shouldn't respond, but my fingers betrayed me. Hey, how did you get my number? I typed, my hands trembling. Sarah had it from the group chat. I just wanted to check in, no pressure. I should have stopped there. I should have deleted the message and told Mark, but I didn't. Instead I replied, and that single response set everything in motion. Over the next few days James and I exchanged messages. At first it was casual small talk, jokes and light conversations, but soon the tone shifted. He asked how I'd been feeling since the night, and I couldn't lie, I haven't stopped thinking about it, I admitted, my heart pounding. as I hit send. Neither have I, he replied almost instantly. His words were a match to the fire already burning inside me. I knew it was wrong. I knew we'd set rules to protect our marriage, but my longing for him outweighed my guilt. I told myself it was harmless, just a conversation, but deep down I knew better. One afternoon while Mark was at work, James suggested we meet just to talk. He said no pressure. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to say no, to end this before it went too far, but curiosity and desire won out. We met at a small cafe on the outskirts of town, far enough from home to avoid running into anyone we knew. Seeing him again sent a wave of emotions crashing over me: excitement, nervousness, guilt. Thanks for coming, he said, his smile disarming. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. He had a way of making me feel seen, as though I were the only person in the world who mattered. It was intoxicating. When it was time to leave, he walked me to my car. I told myself this was it, just a meeting, nothing more, but as I turned to say goodbye, he stepped closer, his hand brushing mine. The tension between us was electric, and before I knew it we were kissing. The guilt hit me like a tidal wave as I drove home. I told myself it was a one-time slip, a moment of weakness I'd never repeat, but deep down I knew I was already in too deep. I told myself that kiss was the end of it, a mistake, a lapse in judgment, nothing more, but the truth got me lingering in every quiet moment. James didn't make it any easier. His messages came more frequently, each one pulling me deeper into a web I was too weak to escape. He was charming, attentive, and persistent, and I was reckless. It started with excuses. Mark would head to work and I'd tell him I was going to the gym or running errands. Instead I'd find myself driving to meet James. The first secret meeting wasn't planned, at least that's what I told myself. James texted me one morning: I can't stop thinking about you, can we meet just for a little while? My heart raced as I read his message. I wanted to say no, I needed to say no, but my fingers typed a different response. Okay, where we met at a motel just outside of town, the kind of place no one would look twice at. As I parked my car I hesitated. The weight of what I was about to do felt suffocating, but then I saw him standing by the door and all my doubts melted away. Hey, he said, his voice low and steady as though this was the most natural thing in the world. Hey, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. The room was small and unremarkable, just a bed, a nightstand, and a television mounted on the wall, but the moment we stepped inside the air changed. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said, his eyes searching mine. I wasn't sure either, I admitted. He stepped closer, his hand brushing my cheek. We don't have to do this if you don't want to, but I did. I wanted him more than I'd ever wanted anything in my life, and as we came together all my guilt and hesitation faded into the background. That first secret meeting was a whirlwind of emotions, passion, exhilaration, and a nagging sense of betrayal I tried to ignore. James was everything I'd imagined and more, and for the first time in years I felt truly alive. But as I drove home reality crashed down on me like a wave. What had I done? How could I look Mark in the eye knowing I'd broken the very foundation of our trust? Mark greeted me with a kiss when I walked through the door, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. How was your day? He asked, his smile warm and genuine. Good, I lied, my stomach churning. That night as Mark slept beside me I stared at the ceiling, replaying the day events in my mind. I told myself it was a one-time thing, a mistake I'd never repeat, but deep down I knew I was lying. James was a drug and I was already addicted. I wish I could tell you that was the last time that I found the strength to pull away and focus on my marriage, but James had become my escape, my secret thrill, and I couldn't let him go. It wasn't just about the physical connection though, that part of him was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was the way he made me feel alive, seen and desired in a way I hadn't felt in years. Every message, every stolen moment with him was like a hit of adrenaline, pulling me deeper into a world I couldn't resist. Our secret meetings became more frequent, coffee shops, motels, even a quiet corner in the park. We found ways to see each other whenever we could. I'd make excuses to Mark, claiming I had errands to run or friends to meet. I hated lying to him, but the thought of losing what I had with James terrified me even more. You're amazing, you know that, James said one afternoon as we lay tangled together in the dim light of a motel room. I smiled, my heart swelling with a mix of pride and guilt. You make me feel that way. He kissed me, his touch sending shivers down my spine. I wish we could have more than this. His words hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. More than this. What did that even mean? I pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the way he made me feel in the moment. But the cracks in my double life were starting to show. Mark wasn't oblivious. He'd started noticing the changes in me. You've been distracted lately, he said one evening as we sat on the couch, a movie playing in the Background: is everything okay? Of course, I replied, too quickly avoiding his gaze. Just a lot on my mind. Mark frowned but didn't press the issue. Still, his suspicion was evident and it made me more cautious. I started deleting messages from James and became meticulous about hiding any trace of him. Despite my efforts, the guilt began to eat away at me. Every time Mark kissed me or held my hand, I felt like a fraud, but no matter how much I hated myself, I couldn't stop. James had become an addiction and I was powerless against it. One afternoon, as I was leaving to meet James, Mark called out to me. "Where are you off to?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. "Just running some errands," I said, for a smile. "Want me to come with you?" My heart skipped a beat. "No, it's fine, just boring stuff." Mark studied me for a moment before nodding. "Okay, be safe." As I walked out the door, my stomach churned with anxiety. Mark was getting suspicious and I knew it was only a matter of time before he started digging deeper, but the thought of giving up James was unbearable. That evening, as I lay in bed beside Mark, I realized I was living on borrowed time. One slip, one mistake, and everything I built with Mark would come crashing down. Yet despite the risks, I couldn't stop myself. James was a high I couldn't quit, and I was willing to risk it all to keep feeling alive. I hadn't been prepared for what happened that night. No matter how many times I tried to convince myself that I could stop, that I could pull back from this tangled mess of lies, there was always another excuse, another moment that would push me deeper into the chaos. I was starting to feel like I was living in a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. But tonight felt different. Tonight I felt something was off, like the weight of everything had finally caught up with me. I'd been out with James earlier, just a quick meeting that felt like a desperate attempt to escape the suffocating guilt I'd been feeling. As I pulled into the driveway, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mark. "I'll be home late, have a surprise for you." I didn't think much of it at the time. He'd been busy with work lately, so I figured it was just another late night task he was working on. But as I walked into the house, something didn't sit right. The lights were dim and the house was quiet, too quiet. I called out for Mark, but there was no answer. I frowned and went toward the bedroom, thinking maybe he'd fallen asleep early or was just hiding out planning his surprise. But when I opened the door, my breath caught in my throat. There in the dim light, I saw Mark with Sarah, James's wife, the woman I'd been sneaking around with her husband to meet. I froze, unable to speak, my heart racing as I watched them pull apart quickly, their faces filled with shock and fear. What is this?" I whispered, barely able to comprehend what was happening. Mark stood up quickly, his face a mix of guilt and regret. I didn't mean for you to find out this way." Sarah quickly gathered herself, standing up from the bed as well. "This wasn't how it was supposed to happen," she said, her voice low and shaky. "Tell me what's going on," I demanded, my voice rising in disbelief. Mark stepped toward me, holding his hands out as though trying to calm me. "I know this looks bad, but it's not what you think, not what I think." I laughed bitterly. "You're in here with her, Mark. How long has this been going on?" "What do you mean it's not what I think?" Sarah looked at me, her eyes filled with remorse. "It's not just him," she admitted softly. "I've been seeing James for months too, and I know you've been seeing him as well." My world tilted on its axis. What I said, the words barely leaving my lips. "I'm sorry," Sarah continued. "When we found out about what you were doing with James, we didn't know what else to do. We've all been hiding things from each other for so long." Mark stepped in, his voice urgent. "It started as a mistake, a cock, but then we got caught up in it. We didn't mean for things to get this far." Everything felt surreal, like I was watching a bad soap opera unfold in my own life. I couldn't process it. My husband and his affair partner had been meeting behind my back while I had been doing the exact same thing with her husband. "You've been seeing Sarah this entire time?" I asked, the betrayal eating away at me. Mark's face softened and he nodded. "I never meant for it to go this far, but once we got involved we couldn't turn back." I was numb, unable to say anything for a long moment. The silence between us was thick and uncomfortable. Finally I spoke. "How could you, Mark? How could you do this to me, to us?" Mark's eyes filled with sorrow. "I don't have an excuse, but when we found out about you and James, it felt like everything we'd been hiding from each other finally came to light. We were both wrong, both of us, but you have to understand I never stopped loving you." Tears began to well up in my eyes as I processed everything, the shock, the confusion, the heartbreak. It all collided at once. The life I thought I had was an illusion. I turned to Sarah, the woman I had once looked at with suspicion and jealousy. "What about you? How could you betray your own marriage like this?" Sarah's eyes were filled with shame. I didn't know how to deal with it either. I found comfort in the idea that I wasn't the only one feeling this way, but we're all tangled up in a mess now. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream, to accuse them of everything they had done to me, but another part of me, the part that was still trying to make sense of this twisted reality, felt something I hadn't expected. Understanding we've all messed up, I said quietly, staring at the floor. All of us, but this is not who we are. We need to figure this out, all of us. Mark nodded slowly, his voice tentative. What do you want to do then? I don't want to lose you, but I know what I've done is unforgivable. Sarah stepped toward me, her expression softening. Maybe we can start over, not just as couples but as individuals. We've been living in denial for too long, pretending like everything was fine when it wasn't. I took a deep breath, my mind swirling with conflicting emotions. For the first time I saw the bigger picture. We were all trapped in this web of lies, and if we ever wanted to find a way out, we had to be honest with ourselves and with each other. I don't know what's going to happen next, I said finally, my voice steady despite the tears that threatened to fall, but we have to try, at least for ourselves, for our marriages. Mark reached for my hand, squeezing, saying it gently, we'll figure it out together. Sarah nodded in agreement. We have to, for the sake of our families. And so despite the mess we had all created, there was a fragile understanding between us. We weren't sure how things would look going forward, but for the first time in a long time we were being honest, and maybe, just maybe, that honesty would give us the chance to rebuild what we'd broken. It was messy, it was pain, but I had hope. For the first time in a long time I had hope. In the days that followed, things didn't magically get better, but they didn't stay as bad as I thought they would. The air between us was thick with tension, but at least it was honest tension. For the first time in months I could look at Mark and not feel the burning guilt of my secret. He too seemed lighter somehow, though the weight of what we had done still lingered in the background. We made a decision to step back from everything, to give ourselves space to think and figure out what we truly wanted. No more games, no more secrecy, no more lies. We had to find a way to rebuild trust, both in ourselves and in each other. Mark and I didn't talk about Sarah and James much after that night. The focus shifted from our messy entanglements to the silent understanding that we needed to work on our marriage. I don't know if it was the raw, honest why that came with admitting everything, or just sheer exhaustion from the lies, but we started opening up in ways we hadn't in years. But we didn't rush things. We started going to therapy each session, feeling like we were peeling back the layers of pain we had built up over time, and slowly we began to feel like we were on the same team again. There was still a lot of work to do. Healing didn't happen overnight, but I began to believe that maybe we could salvage something. As for Sarah and James, we all agreed that it was best to take a break for now. We needed to focus on ourselves, to deal with the wreckage we'd caused before thinking about getting involved in any more complicated relationships. I can't say that everything was perfect after that, or that there weren't moments where I doubted our future, but there was something different this time, something real. We had all been through something unimaginable, and it changed us whether we liked it or not. I found myself looking at Mark in a different way. It wasn't just about physical attraction anymore. It was about rediscovering who we were before everything fell apart. It was about understanding each other's flaws and accepting them. It was about knowing that in the end love wasn't just about the highs, it was about weathering the storms together. And maybe, just maybe, it was about learning to forgive not just each other but ourselves. The road ahead wasn't easy, but we were moving forward, one street